Africa's land is at a turning point. Burkina Faso and South Africa are leading a charge to reclaim control from foreign interests through groundbreaking land reforms. This bold move towards sovereignty has triggered strong reactions from the West. Chapter 1. Introduction: Shifting Power Dynamics in Africa. The year 2025 marks a pivotal juncture in Africa's trajectory, characterized by a noticeable shift in the continental power dynamic. For decades, Western nations and multinational corporations have exerted significant influence over Africa's resources and land, often at the expense of local communities and long-term sustainable development. Now, however, countries such as Burkina Faso and South Africa are actively challenging this established order, signaling a new era of self-determination and sovereignty. These nations are enacting bold land reform policies that seek to reclaim control over their natural resources and reshape their economic futures. This shift is not merely a political act, but a profound statement about economic independence. By asserting ownership over their land, African nations aim to reduce their reliance on foreign aid and investment, fostering a more equitable distribution of wealth and opportunities for their citizens. This movement is driven by a growing awareness of historical injustices and a desire to forge a new path forward, one where African resources are used to benefit African people. Chapter 2. Burkina Faso's groundbreaking land reform bill. In February 2025, Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, took a decisive stride towards national sovereignty by passing a landmark land reform bill. This legislation effectively transfers complete control of all land within the country to the Burkina Faso state, dismantling foreign ownership and granting the government authority over land allocation in accordance with national priorities. This initiative stems from a determination to dismantle colonial-era structures that have historically favored foreign entities and hindered local development. The bill is designed to combat the widespread exploitation of land by foreign corporations and elites, ensuring that land resources serve the needs of the Burkina Faso people. The reform also aims to support local farmers, promote sustainable agriculture, and reduce the country's dependence on foreign food imports. The government envisions using state-controlled land to foster industrial growth, build critical infrastructure, and create employment opportunities for its citizens. This move has been lauded by some as a critical step toward economic liberation, while drawing concern from international investors and foreign governments who fear potential disruptions to their existing operations and interests within the country. Chapter 3. South Africa's Land Expropriation Act. South Africa's pursuit of land reform has been a long and arduous journey, marked by challenges and controversies. In 2025, the Land Expropriation Act, enacted after years of debate, stands as a significant milestone in addressing the historical injustices of apartheid. This law empowers the government to expropriate land without compensation, specifically for public purposes, with the goal of redressing the severe imbalances in land ownership that persist in the country. The act is not intended to be a blanket seizure of land, but rather a targeted approach to acquire land for essential infrastructure projects, public housing, and the redistribution of land to previously disadvantaged communities. The South African government emphasizes that each case will be evaluated on its merits, and that the expropriation process will adhere to due process and legal safeguards. Chapter 4. Historical Context. Colonial exploitation of African land. The current wave of land reform initiatives across Africa cannot be fully understood without examining the historical context of colonial exploitation. During the colonial era, European powers systematically seized vast tracts of African land, displacing indigenous populations and establishing a system of land ownership that primarily benefited foreign settlers and extractive industries. Colonial land policies were deliberately designed to facilitate the extraction of resources and the production of cash crops for export to Europe, leaving local communities impoverished and landless. This legacy of colonial land dispossession continues to shape Africa's economic landscape today. After independence, many African nations inherited land ownership patterns that were deeply skewed in favor of foreign interests and local elites, perpetuating inequalities and hindering sustainable development. The push for land reform is, therefore, an attempt to reverse the effects of this historical injustice, reclaim national sovereignty, and ensure that African land resources are used to benefit African people, not foreign powers. Chapter 5. Zimbabwe's Land Reform under Mugabe, a controversial precedent. Zimbabwe's land reform program, initiated in 2000 under the leadership of President Robert Mugabe, serves as a complex and controversial case study in the pursuit of land redistribution, motivated by a desire to correct historical injustices stemming from colonial-era land ownership patterns. Mugabe's government forcibly seized land from white farmers and redistributed it to black Zimbabweans. This action was met with condemnation from Western governments and international organizations, which cited concerns about human rights abuses, economic mismanagement, and the rule of law. The Zimbabwean land reform program had a devastating impact on the country's agricultural sector, leading to a sharp decline in production and widespread economic hardship. The chaotic and often violent implementation of the program resulted in the displacement of experienced farmers, disrupted agricultural supply chains, and deterred foreign investment. Even with its stated goals of addressing historical injustices, Zimbabwe's experience serves as a cautionary tale about the potential pitfalls of poorly planned and executed land reform. The international community remains divided on whether the long-term consequences will outweigh the short-term disruptions, with some arguing that the transfer of land to black Zimbabweans was a necessary step towards achieving social justice, while others maintain that the program was a catastrophic failure that undermined the country's economic stability. Chapter 6. Mali's struggle to reclaim gold reserves. As of 2025, Mali continues its determined struggle to regain control over its significant gold reserves. For years, foreign mining companies, primarily from Western nations, have dominated Mali's gold industry, extracting vast quantities of gold with limited benefit to the local population. The Malian government, under President Assimi Goïta, has been actively seeking to renegotiate mining contracts, increase royalties, and promote greater participation of Malian companies in the sector. The government aims to ensure that the extraction of gold contributes more significantly to the Malian economy, funding education, healthcare, and infrastructure projects. However, these efforts have faced resistance from the entrenched foreign mining interests. The struggle reflects a broader trend in Africa, where nations are seeking to assert greater control over their natural resources and ensure that these resources benefit their own citizens rather than enriching foreign corporations. Mali's determination to reclaim its gold reserves is a testament to the growing demand for resource sovereignty on the African continent. Chapter 7. Economic benefits, agricultural productivity, and food security. Land reform holds the potential to unlock significant economic benefits for African nations, particularly in terms of agricultural productivity and food security. By redistributing land to local farmers and promoting sustainable agricultural practices, governments can stimulate increased agricultural output and reduce reliance on food imports. This can lead to improved food security, reduced poverty, and increased incomes for rural communities. Wait a second. I have a question for you. What do you think about these land reforms and the Western reaction? Share your thoughts with us. Furthermore, increased agricultural productivity can create new opportunities for agro-processing industries, adding value to agricultural products and creating jobs in rural areas. The key to realizing these economic benefits lies in providing farmers with access to credit, technology, and training, empowering them to maximize the potential of their land. By investing in agriculture and supporting local farmers, African nations can strengthen their economies and build a more sustainable and resilient food system. Chapter 8. Industrial development and infrastructure. Land reform can serve as a catalyst for industrial development and the expansion of infrastructure across Africa. By consolidating land ownership and implementing strategic land use planning, governments can facilitate the development of industrial zones, manufacturing facilities, and transportation networks. This can attract both domestic and foreign investment in key sectors of the economy, driving economic growth and creating employment opportunities. Moreover, land reform can enable the construction of essential infrastructure projects, such as roads, railways, and energy facilities, which are crucial for supporting industrial development and improving connectivity within the country. The government can prioritize investments in sectors that align with its national development goals, creating a more diversified and resilient economy. Chapter 9. Resolving land disputes and promoting social stability. One of the crucial aims of land reform is resolving land disputes and promoting social stability. Across Africa, overlapping claims, historical grievances, and unclear tenure systems often lead to conflicts between farmers, herders, and indigenous communities. By centralizing land administration, implementing transparent land allocation processes, and establishing effective dispute resolution mechanisms, governments can reduce the incidence of land disputes and promote peaceful coexistence. Secure land tenure rights are essential for fostering investment in agriculture, protecting vulnerable communities, and preventing displacement. Effective land governance can strengthen social cohesion, reduce violence, and build a more equitable society. Achieving social stability through fair and inclusive land management is crucial for creating an environment conducive to sustainable development and economic prosperity. Chapter 10. Western reaction, resistance, fear, and condemnation. The response from Western governments and influential figures to land reform initiatives in Africa has been characterized by resistance, fear, and open condemnation. Many Western nations, accustomed to benefiting from favorable land policies that allow their corporations to exploit African resources, view these reforms as a direct threat to their economic interests. This has resulted in a barrage of criticism, often framed as concerns about property rights, economic stability, and the rule of law. The Western reaction reveals a deep-seated apprehension about losing their long-held influence over African affairs. Powerful voices in the West have used their platforms to denounce land reform, warning of dire consequences, and advocating for sanctions against countries that pursue such policies. The underlying message is clear. Any attempt to challenge the established order will be met with fierce opposition and economic retaliation. Chapter 11. Elon Musk's criticism and the broader Western narrative. Elon Musk, a South African-born billionaire with significant business interests in Africa, has been a vocal critic of land reform, particularly in South Africa. His comments, expressing concerns about the potential damage to the business environment and investor confidence, reflect a broader Western narrative that equates land reform with economic instability and the violation of property rights. Musk's criticism, amplified by his vast wealth and influence, has contributed to a climate of uncertainty and fear surrounding land reform in Africa. This narrative often ignores the historical injustices and inequalities that these reforms seek to address, instead focusing on the potential negative consequences for foreign investors and economic growth. This perspective reinforces a long-standing pattern of prioritizing Western interests over the needs and aspirations of African nations. Chapter 12. Economic blackmail and diplomatic pressure. In many instances, the Western reaction to land reform extends beyond mere criticism and enters the realm of economic blackmail and diplomatic pressure. Countries that have dared to challenge the status quo, such as Zimbabwe, have faced years of sanctions and isolation from the international community. The United States and the European Union have imposed these measures under the guise of human rights concerns. But the underlying motive is often to punish these nations for asserting control over their land and resources. The threat of sanctions and the withdrawal of aid serve as powerful deterrents. discouraging other African nations from following suit. This economic blackmail represents a continuation of the colonial mindset, where the West feels entitled to Africa's resources and is willing to use its economic and diplomatic leverage to maintain its grip on the continent. Chapter 13: Africa's Future, Sovereignty and Self-Determination. Even with facing considerable opposition, African nations are increasingly determined to chart their own course towards a future defined by sovereignty and self-determination. Land reform is a crucial step in this journey, representing a rejection of the colonial legacy and a commitment to ensuring that Africa's resources benefit African people. Hold on a second. Do you believe Africa can truly achieve economic independence without controlling its land? Let me your thoughts in the below. The pursuit of economic independence through land reform is not without its challenges, but it reflects a growing sense of agency and empowerment across the continent. As African nations continue to assert their right to control their own destinies, they are paving the way for a more equitable and prosperous future for all Africans. The success of these endeavors will depend on their ability to withstand external pressure, build strong domestic institutions, and prioritize the well-being of their citizens above all else. The journey to reclaim Africa's land is just beginning. It's a bold step toward a future where Africa's wealth benefits its own people. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's see what tomorrow brings. Don't forget to subscribe.